All right, hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel, and we tend to focus on theories of everything. And these are all-encompassing theories that give you a holistic view and trying to almost synthesize them over time, where, if you have a theory of everything, um, and somebody else has a theory of everything, they probably are saying the same thing if they're accurate, but they might be using different languages, different terminology, different um, emphases. And so when we do some comparative uh, theories of everything, then we might be able to kind of boil it down and come to an internal understanding of how these things work. We started off doing many videos on the ancient Egyptian tree of life, and now we're working on the reciprocal system of theory from Dewey B. Larson. And this is, I believe, the 280th video that we've done on the reciprocal system. Mr. Larson was an engineer back in the 20th century, and about 1930 he had some um, insights that he pursued and eventually wrote up his two fundamental postulates back in the late 1950s, from which he began to write books and wrote double-digit books and maybe 50 or so articles, gave a lot of talks, and developed a little bit of a following, but mostly was ignored and or ridiculed by the scientific establishment for no reason, and uh, died in 1990. His work was continued on by some of his small group of followers. Probably the two that have done the most work are Dr. KBK Nehru and Dr. Bruce Perret. And we're going to be looking at one of Perret's articles today. But to just backtrack on Larson's theory, the basic idea is that we live in a universe of motion. The universe is not made out of matter, it's not made out of energy, it's made out of motion. Motion, for Larson, was the relationship between space and time. This is a reciprocal relationship. Space and time are basically the same thing, two poles of the same thing. If you increase your space, you decrease your time, and vice versa. They have a reciprocal relationship, just as the same as they're basically a fraction. Motion is a fraction or a ratio where space or time is the numerator and time or space is the denominator. And with a few stipulations, one is that space and time both are in 3 dimensions. Space and time both have their scalar aspects. Scalar motion is a motion with a magnitude but no particular direction. And you can think of that like a clock. Clock time. Time is always getting later and later and later, but in no particular direction. And you can also think of that in space as a balloon with a bunch of dots on it. You blow up the balloon, all the dots are moving away from each other. Space is always moving away from each other, but in no particular direction. And this was actually observed by the Hubble telescope in the 1920s, as all of the distant galaxies are moving away from each other. And like Larson would say, in this, from our general perspective, we see space up close and we see time very far away. But with that Hubble telescope, the space, all the distant galaxies are moving away from each other. That is the distant view of space. And then if we saw time up close, we would see 3 dimensions of time. And then the third stipulation is that time and space only come in discrete units, or they are quantized. There's a minimum unit of time and a minimum unit of space. And if you don't have a full unit, then you don't have anything. So you have to have at least 1 unit to have anything. And then if you want to go to 2 units, you have to have at least 2. If you only have 1.93, then you only have 1. That results in what Larson calls unit speed. 1 unit of space in 1 unit of time is unit speed, or the speed of light. The speed of light is 1 over 1 equals 1. And for Larson, the speed of light was the midpoint, or the null point, or the neutral point of the universe. Whereas for legacy science, the neutral point is 0. But for Larson, it makes sense. The universe of motion, if the universe is made out of motion, that means that motion precedes everything else. So before you have anything, you have motion. And that is a little bit counterintuitive, because you have to be able to accept the fact that you have motion even before you have anything moving. The motion comes before there is anything to move. And the thing that you are moving eventually is motion in and of itself. Matter is just one variety of motion, as is energy. Those are both varieties of motion, as is speed, acceleration, force, pressure, density, electrical capacitance, magnetic permeability, permittivity, capacitance. These are all resistance. These are all forms of motion, and they are all expressible exclusively in terms of space and time. Matter is time to the 3rd power over space to the 3rd power. Energy is time over space. Force is time over space to the 2nd power, whereas acceleration is space over time to the 2nd power. Pressure is time over space to the 4th power, and on and on and on. And that whole system there is a quantum improvement from the MKS system, because now you're just using 2 variables, time and space, and you can use that general format to check all your equations. You know, does the equation check out in terms of space and time? You know, a simple example, E equals mc squared. Energy equals matter times the speed of light squared. Energy is time over space. Matter is time to the 3rd power over space to the 3rd power. C squared is the speed of light. Speed is space over time. The car is moving 10 miles an hour. But that's squared, so you have space to the 2nd power over time to the 2nd power. You multiply that all out, and it balances. So that equation is at least valid in terms of the units. And so that provides a very good check for your system. Now, when you do have the speed of light as the neutral point, or the midpoint, that means that you have 2 sectors of the universe. You have the material sector, where everything is moving slower than the speed of light, and that's the sector of the universe that we're familiar with. That's the sector of the universe where Einstein is saying that the speed of light is the maximum speed of the universe. And so that's the sector of the universe that legacy science is familiar with. That's where we have our coordinate space, our 3 dimensions of space, and our clock time. The clock is always getting later and later and later. These are relations that we're familiar with. But then there is also an equally large sector of the universe where all motion is faster than the speed of light, which would have been an abomination for Einstein and many other physicists out there. Um, and in this sector of the universe, which Larson called the cosmic sector, you have coordinate time, 3 dimensions of time, and clock space. Space is always getting farther and farther and farther apart. We know nothing about this sector of the universe, basically, but using that type of extrapolation, we can figure it out, because what is going on in the cosmic sector is exactly the same thing as what's going on in the material sector, except that you just have to reverse the roles of space and time. And so Larson did a lot of work with this cosmic sector to basically flesh it out and determine what's going on there. And so he has a lot of material on antimatter, what Larson calls cosmic matter, cosmic rays, cosmic ray decay, but also the cosmic sector in terms of life units. So for Larson, life is a stable combination of a material and cosmic grouping, a material unit and a cosmic unit grouped together. Now, normally when you put together a cosmic and a material unit, they annihilate each other. That's your basic matter-antimatter interaction. But if they are directly out of phase and in the right proportions, then it turns into the life unit in Larson's terminology. We got into all that when I read over his book called Beyond Space and Time. That's his last book. And if you go back in the archives about 4 or 5 months, you will see many, many, many videos that I did on his book Beyond Space and Time. Okay, now today we're looking at Bruce Perret's article. Now, Bruce Perret, along with Nehru, after Larson died, particularly after Larson died, they started to extend Larson's theory into different areas, but and also to correct certain aspects of Larson's deduction from his initial 2 fundamental postulates, and came up with what they call RS2, the reevaluation of the reciprocal system. Now, this reevaluation stays true to the spirit of the reciprocal system, but makes some changes in terms of some of the details, and some major details as well. The structure of the photon is one of the major things. The geometry of the universe is another, and the scale of the universe, both in terms of time and space, are all things that the reciprocal system too has revised from Larson. Now, when Dr. Perret wrote, he wrote many articles under his own name, but he also wrote many articles under the name of Daniel Phoenix III, which was a character. Don't know whether it was a real character or not, but Phoenix 3 project was a top secret government project that included the Philadelphia experiment, or the Montauk project, which was a time travel project that went horribly badly in the early 1980s. And we're reading one of Daniel's articles that is called Geoengineering, Chemtrails, HARP, HAARP, World Orders, Timelines, and Ascension. And we read the first installment of this yesterday. And so if you want to get back to the very start of the article, you want to watch yesterday's video before watching this one. We're going to be taking over on like the third page, and he was mentioning how in Larson's book Universe of Motion, which is his book on astronomy, one of his books on astronomy, Larson sets out that the stellar evolution and galactic evolution, the legacy sciences model of stellar evolution is backwards. Now you may know the little saying, "Oh, be a fine girl, kiss me." That is, you know, an acronym for OBAFGKM. That those are the classes of stars and the evolution of the stars. You know, the stars start out as O stars, and then they become B stars, and then they become A stars, and then F stars, and so on. In Larson's system, that scale is backwards, and so actually the O star is the final destination, and B is the second to last, A is the third to last, and so on. And so that plays a part in this. Perret just got done discussing that, and he's going to move on from here. As a consequence to setting the stellar evolutionary sequence straight, some conclusions are different than popular belief. 1. Stars start out as large dust clouds, condense into red supergiants, orange giants, yellow, then white main sequence stars, then on up to blue giants, then supernova. The same process as heating up a piece of metal, from the initial red glow to where it gets blue hot and breaks. 2. Since stars are built from dust and debris as fuel, the more fuel available, the hotter the sun will get. 3. As David Wilcock, who you may know as an author, he was actually a friend, or at least a housemate of Dr. Bruce Perret, and I think learned Bruce Perret was basically one of his informants, and he taught Wilcock the reciprocal system, but in my opinion, Wilcock never really picked it up to its full extent. Otherwise, he would have homed in on the reciprocal system and learned it a lot better, and stopped messing around with other theories. But anyway, as David Wilcock has identified in the past, planetary moons are leaving trails throughout the solar system, indicating we've entered a dusty area of space. With all this dust and debris available for stellar fuel, the sun is growing in size and getting hotter, moving from a class G yellow star to a class F yellow-white star. And 4, because our system of long-term dating is based on an assumption of radioactive elements being formed when the Earth was born, not being produced regularly, our system of geological eras is drastically wrong. Astronomical events move thousands of times faster than assumed by astronomers. The planet and solar system are nowhere near as old as claimed, and mankind has been around to see the sun change in the past. Now, that is kind of an extension from Larson. I don't believe Larson came to that conclusion, but it does flow from the reciprocal system and the idea of how radioactivity works. Larson did write on radioactivity, but I don't believe he questioned the legacy scientist scale and how they actually were determining half-lives. But Perret did, and he determined that, say, like uranium, I think 235, is supposed to have a half-life of like 4.5 billion years, and that's kind of where we got the age of the Earth. Perret kind of went through a process of redefining how that was measured, and determined that the scale was off by thousands. Like 4.5 billion years was in the millions of years, or possibly even in the thousands of years. I think millions of years. When you consider these consequences from a corrected stellar evolution, one conclusion is obvious. Global warming is not due to flatulent cows, but due to the fact that our sun is getting hotter and will continue to get hotter. Okay, this next section is called Sun Heats in Quantum Steps, Not a Smooth Transition. In the reciprocal system, everything is quantized into discrete units. So is the case with the destructive limits. Now, last time he mentioned that each element has a destructive limit. And so that determines kind of how stars evolve, because certain elements are more populous than others. And when an element like iron, which is much more populous than even all the elements after it combined, when iron gets to its destructive limit, it results in what is called a supernova. Anyway, so is the case with the destructive limits. Stars do not heat smoothly, but tend to stay at a specific temperature, then suddenly jump to a new temperature range as the magnetic ionization level increases, which controls the age limit. Okay, there's also an age limit. There's a temperature limit and an age limit of matter. Now, when it gets to a certain age limit, then there's a different kind of supernova that is a result. That is why we have a distinct color temperature class system for identifying stars. The discrete jumps become very visible when you look at an HR diagram, which is a legacy diagram that they usually use to map out stellar evolution. When you look at an HR diagram with the correct evolutionary sequence, as stars move from red giants to red supergiants to orange giants to the main sequence, distinct bars on the graph with few stars between them. The earlier stages of heating up take bigger jumps than the later ones, so that is obvious here. Astronomers consider the giants to be separate from dwarfs because they do not realize the stars heat and condense in quantum steps. They assume a continuous change, so they miss the connection. Okay, this section is called Radioactivity, Accelerating to Faster Than Light Speeds. Conventional understanding of radioactive elements needs some updating. In the reciprocal system, when you accelerate matter past the speed of light, it becomes radioactive. It emits radio waves while it is throwing off particles. That's why they call it radioactive. Radioactive. It has to do with the fact that the zone of isotopic stability inverts when you cross the speed of light. Atomic explosions in the stellar interior are violent enough to push motion past the speed of light, something that cannot be accomplished by electromagnetic means in particle accelerators. Okay, that is a paragraph that probably could be unpacked. Each sentence, needs some explanation, but I think he's going to use an example and try to clarify some of this. For example, take uranium-236. Uranium is element number 92, so its natural mass is 184, twice the element number. And the remaining 54 units of mass are isotopic mass, an accumulation of mass or neutrinos that forms the U-236 isotope. 184 plus 52 equals 236. So if you have U-236, you have 184 mass units is because of the atomic mass, and then 52 of the units are isotopic mass. And Larson has a formula for calculating the isotopic mass. Once U-236 is accelerated past the speed of light, the inversion takes place and the stable zone becomes 184 minus 52 equals 132. So the atom has to throw off 104 units of mass to become stable at faster than light speed. So as soon as it crosses the speed of light, it becomes massively unstable. And this throwing off of atomic mass, isotopic mass, is called radioactive emission. Let me look at some of the footnotes here before moving on. Back to the global warming thing. One of his footnotes, about 9 minutes into Jesse Ventura's conspiracy theory television program, Global Warming, he interviews a reclusive climate scientist who has come to the same conclusion. It's not the sun, it's the sun, not man, that is the cause of the warming. And then he's talking here about radioactivity. Has to do with the way magnetic ionization affects elements as a second power function. I think this is using this concept called equivalent space. With no ionization, elements up to element 118 are stable. In Larson's system, there are 118 elements. I think the scientists have only discovered about 105 of them, and every one of them above uranium is unstable and doesn't really exist in the natural environment, but can exist like in a laboratory setting. But in Larson's system, there are actually 118 elements that are stable, or that are in potential. But in our environment, with a magnetic ionization of 1, only 92 of them are stable. But if we went to a place in the universe where the magnetic ionization level was 0, then all 118 elements would be stable. If we went to a place where the magnetic ionization was 2, then I believe only elements I believe gold is element number 79, and it would be all elements below gold are stable, and then numbers 80 through 92 would also be unstable at the magnetic ionization level of 2. And then if you go to higher and higher and higher magnetic ionization levels, fewer and fewer elements would be stable according to an equation that Larson has derived. Here he does say with unit magnetic ionization, everything from uranium up becomes radioactive. 27 elements, which is current ionization level for Earth. At 2 units, everything from gold on up is radioactive. Only 13 more elements added to the fuel source, and it diminishes from there. If you think back to the days of Bob Lazar and his claims that UFO propulsion used elements 115, well, 115 has a natural mass of 230 and an estimated mass of 288, meaning there are 58 units of isotopic mass. 115 is highly unstable at speeds less than light, but only has a mass of 172 at faster than light speeds, where you invert and you take the 230 and subtract the 58 instead of adding it. So it is completely stable at faster than light speeds. Pull it out of the reactor, though, and you'll be bombarded with X-rays to the point of glowing in the dark. This is why the faster than light drives are never shut down, which brings me to the reciprocal process, matter dropping from faster than light to sublight speeds. And then the next section is called X-ray emission, faster than light to sublight speed. And we will get into that starting tomorrow. So thank you for tuning in today. And tune in tomorrow to find out more about X-ray emission, radioactive emission. And have a great day.